Hello everyone, we warmly welcome you all to a special series of program brought to you by Indian Achievers Forum. I'm your host Vatika Singh. Indian Achievers Forum has time and now organized various e-summits to talk about the burning agendas in the economy. Today we are here to talk about the human capital challenges and solutions for the banking sector. India has always witnessed the ascending demograph. With banking sector being the rib of the economy, it becomes important to solve the predicaments related to human capital. It is time to transform the HR processes and implement the new age concepts, inviting innovative ideas to make the banks future ready. With this, I'd like to welcome our moderator for today's e-summit, Mr. T. Muralidharan, who is the CMD of TMI Network. I'd like him to speak something on the topic.
Looking at this topic, the topic is a very important topic on human capital management in the banking sector, challenges and opportunities. Now, let me start by saying the most important resource in the banking sector is human capital. We are in the era where everything in banking is going technology driven. You have ATMs, you have apps now, you can do online banking. But behind all of them is one common factor. What is that? People. And I think to a large extent, the private sector banks have understood it very well, and to some extent, the public sector banks. But I still think that attention to this topic is far below what it should be. And I'll explain this in a very simple analogy. About 20 years ago, when you wanted to get a housing loan or you were supposed to get a car loan, you went to the bank branch closest to you where you had an account and you ask the branch manager, I want to take a car loan or a scooter loan, and he will call somebody from within the branch and then they'll give you some forms and you'll fill it up. Today, I don't think a single person ever goes to a bank branch asking for a housing loan or a car loan. Today, the bank has to reach out to the customer in many ways. For example, in a car loan scenario, as soon as you go to a car showroom, next to in the same showroom, some people are sitting from banks. They are asking you, do you want a loan? And they give you the loan. For example, in the case of housing, the builder automatically connects you to the bank. So the banks come chasing you for giving you the loan. The market has turned upside down. Earlier, I went to the bank. Today, bank has to come to me. On top of it, the way bank is reaching me is changing in many ways. There are online platforms. There are various intermediaries who are collecting the prospects. It could be an agent, sometimes you appoint a distributor or a marketing person. In short, the fundamental change in banking system has been that bankers have to go out to get business, whether it is retail banking or it's corporate banking. Earlier days, even corporate banking meant that I, as a borrower, have to go to the bank and sit with the branch manager to make my application. They will take their own sweet time and they will tell you, okay, come after 7 days. They will make a recommendation. There'll be some committee review them and then they'll give you some recommendation. That has changed now. Today, a good borrower has many banks chasing them. The banks are coming to borrower's office and say, what can I do? What kind of facility can I offer you? Now, this transformation has happened in the marketplace. Has it happened inside a bank? Inside a bank branch? This is the question. For example, SBI, State Bank of India, one of the largest banks in India, they McKinsey, went to McKinsey and did a complete restructuring of the retail or what we call as a small assets, retail assets, things like car loans, housing loans. They restructured it and took it away from the branch. Now, a lot of regional officers sprung up which manages all these applications for housing loan. Many of the people who send the applications are agents of the bank. So the bank branch is not involved. The bank branch has been cut off for many of these retail loans and they go directly to regional office. So this centralization, creating a separate channel has also changed the banking completely in a public sector bank. So my question, especially to CEOs of banks, how much have your people changed? The senior management, let's say senior GM, or branch manager. Let's say in a public sector bank, the hierarchy is normally in terms of level one, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and all that. So really at level 4 is the chief manager and level 5 is an AGM level. This is where the bulk of the action is happening in a branch or at the operating level. How much have they changed? How much of the bank people have realized that the business is not going to flow in? They have to move out and get business. Second problem is in terms of human capital management is the change management. The older generation has seen the past glories of the banking industry, where as I mentioned, their customers came to them. Now today they cannot advise the younger people how they should go out and get business. They don't know themselves. They have some idea, but they've not done it themselves. So who's going to train the large number of scale one, scale two, scale three, scale four officers in a banking system, in a public sector bank, to realize the importance of going to the customer? How do you become market centric? How do you acquire customers on your own initiative? For example, how do you use Facebook to identify new customers for a corporate banking? How do you use, let's say, LinkedIn to identify prospects for housing loans? Well, there are many, many new things that are happening. So I think my biggest comment about human capital management, especially in public sector banks, is that the market has moved on, technology has moved on, but the people have not moved on. And they need to seriously reflect on it. And that's what we are trying to do in this workshop. That we want to bring in some of the leaders to talk about mindset change in public sector and bank employees to this fundamental change of putting the customer first and chasing the customer rather than waiting for the customer to come to you. Now come to private sector banks. What's the fundamental change that has happened in private sector banks? COVID. What is COVID? COVID has pushed more and more bank employees to work from home. More importantly, it has pushed a lot of customers of retail customers or B2B or corporate customers to work from home. So even private sector banks logics were earlier, private sector banks logic was go in the market, reach out to as many customers as possible, in effect, carpet bomb the entire marketplace and connect with as many customers as possible. So you visit them in the offices, visit them wherever you can, sit in the bank branch. Today, nobody is walking into bank branch thanks to COVID. So private sector banks have to ask the question, are my employees who are basically carpet bombing, who are basically bodies in the field, or the frontline staff were largely bodies running around chasing customers. Are they ready for the work from home era? Can we, for example, ask how many of them can identify a customer to sell a housing loan sitting at home? Can they consummate? Can they convince the customer to take a housing loan without meeting him face to face? How do you identify prospects? How do you build a brand of you as a salesman? Because the boundaries, the physical boundaries of selling also change. For example, I sitting in Hyderabad can talk to a bank employee in Bombay and do the transaction. I don't have to go to local branch. So the entire geographical construct, which was there earlier in private sector banks, has gone because online banking with work from home banking, wow, it's completely changed. So again, I'm asking a simple question: how many of our junior management understand that they can't do any more push selling? They need to do pull. Pull means they must build a brand, build their positioning, build their offerings, be available in multiple platforms, identify prospects, build relationship online, use the latest technology tools. Now, this transition, if they don't wake up, many of the so-called superstars of yesterday in a private sector bank will fail because their entire capability of influencing somebody face to face, moment you remove that away from them, they cannot survive. They cannot succeed. So this is the context in which we are trying to do this seminar or workshop on human capital management challenges and opportunities. What I mentioned so far is the challenges. The opportunities is what we want to discover in this workshop. We want to listen to the speakers who are the from the sectors in the banking, and we want to know from them what are they doing to address mindset changes, which are absolutely required both in public sector bank and private sector banks in the frontline staff. How do we bring about a mindset change? One to the work from home era and work to, and second to an era where customer is king and we as a banker have to go to the customer rather than customer come to us. So this is all I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
This program is presented by TMI Network. They are the biggest staffing solutions company in the country, especially for the banking sector. Mr. Muralidharan is the pioneer behind it, and I am the advisor chief mentor to the organization on the subject, apart from being the chairman of Indian Achievers.
Narendra ji,
Right.
about your experience in Indian Overseas Bank, I think it's been a very classic public sector bank. I think my initial thoughts are in terms of two things. One, there's a transformation happening on the customer end of the banking side with digital banking, payment banks, small banks coming into picture. And the other side, the banking industry employees, especially the human capital, are they moving as fast as the market is moving, the way the banking customers are moving? That's the first starting question. I would request you to kindly share some thoughts from your experience in Indian Ocean Bank. Welcome, Mr. Tanay.
Thank Yeah.
Good afternoon, sir. Sorry for delay, sir.
Good afternoon, Taneja ji.
Good afternoon,
And
sir.
thank you, Muralidharan. That
Yes.
you are right. That today during this COVID, at the outset, let me acknowledge the hard and very difficult time wherein our entire, I think, our entire rank and file of the banking industry, in spite of the COVID and the fear of infection and all that, they had continued to function, not without a single break. And they have ensured that the continuity of service to customers. And the other side, of course, the banks also have geared up their digital technology. And that's why during the COVID, 95% of transaction, thanks to NPCI, UPI payment, and other mobile banking, internet banking, and all faceless transaction could be undertaken, and it has 95% transaction. Now, your question, that is where, after particularly demonetization also, and with the technology, particularly, of course, the private sector also took a lot of initiative in the technology space, and none of the public sector bank lagged behind in that. Higher budget in terms of technological investment, and the example set by the State Bank of India, I am not undermining, we have Thankselaji in the Union Bank, and there, they have been winning. Similarly, IOB won quite a lot of awards of the technology initiative by the instituted by the IBA. So the State Bank of India, recent days, the YONO has become a single point to give service to the, including service to customers, including online banking and online credit disbursement, particularly even in agriculture, personal banking. During that period, they could ensure, and even under the that 3 crore what you call credit guarantee loans, which where they could not take the documentation personally and all. So that has been all processed through the technology. So as Muralidharan has acknowledged, that the customers would have felt the difference in terms of technological improvement, technological gadgets, because earlier it was told the banks were more concerned with the internal technology and internal process improvement, and they used the technology for internal work. And later, the technology has moved totally driven by the customer's preference and customer's requirement. So that is the one aspect. Now, other side, the subject is human resources. There, naturally, in the some past, there were some constraints that the banks were not allowed to recruit, and some embargo on recruitment took place. With the result, the new additions and new culture of or new generational staff, they were not brought in. but that has been later, of course, moved. It is not there, and banks have recruited. In fact, you asked my IOB example. In my period of 14 years, 4 years, I had recruited more than 18,000 staff. That's how the entire mix of staff got completely changed. And fortunately, for some time, we had the opportunity of campus recruitment also. So we did the quite a lot of colleges and did the campus recruitment. Of course, later I think Tangsel will be telling on that. There was some restriction by the Supreme Court that you cannot select this college, that college. Even my earlier bank, Corporation Bank, also we had a campus. Then we had to necessarily take by the whatever the banking selection board route and give opportunity everywhere. And the around 500 such officers were trained by the Manipal Training Institute for 1 year, and they were absorbed in the bank in scale 1 and scale 2 depending on their qualification. So this type of new laws were brought in, and also quite a lot of that why I'm telling is all those who recruited in 80 and maybe nearer to that all have retired by 2020. So in the banking industry now, how this young generation who are there, how they could be given the exposure, knowledge, skill development, training, and all that in a shorter period, so that they will be able to shoulder the higher responsibility. Because the fact that there have been a lot of vacancy coming on account of this massive retirement or superannuation. Now these some of them may be taking the higher position at a shorter interval, and their career graph today, any officer who joined maybe banking sector within 10 to 13 years, he can rise up to even up to general manager. That is the speed which we have seen quite a lot of banks. Even in the recent executive director cadre, lot of people are in the having more than 10 to 15 years of service left, and this is the fact that they are coming to a higher position. Now they are also required in the highest position also, that if they are given only 5 years or 3 years, how are they again going to get? That's where the government has said, I think every 3 years they will review them, and later they will move them maybe in the hierarchy and get the promotion for MD and also bigger bank. So your question was, are
Yeah,
we also having the new skills, new specialization, and new areas of banking? That way also banks have got a very good technological what you call department, and they have also adapted artificial intelligence, machine learning. In one of the what you call recent some jury, myself and Tangsel, we were there, we could find public sector banks are getting quite a lot of award even in that, by introducing all this new technology and providing seamless service to customers and delightness. So in nutshell, that
yeah, I got it.
banks have done very extraordinarily in this area. Private sector bank may be little higher, but now today public sector banks are not lacking, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, because I'm going to be focused on very pointed questions. And
Yeah,
let me give you some background. I've got Mr. Mohan Tangsale. I think Mohan Tangsale,
yeah.
you'll remember, I think we exchanged some notes when you were in IBA. I'm the chairman of TMI Group, and I
Okay,
think
okay,
I was talking to you at that time. And I
okay.
think some common friend introduced us. I think you were in Central Bank of India earlier, or
You're right. You're right. You're right.
right. We have spoken to each other at that time.
Okay.
Mr. Tareja, please welcome. I think
Thank
CBI
you,
is a
sir.
well-known bank, and we'd like to talk to you also. And Mr. Radhakrishnan is also there. Thank you, Mr. Radhakrishnan. My question to you, Tangsale Saab, is very straightforward. You are very much aware of the public sector or the private sector scenario right now. And you also know that complete transformation happening on the customer end. The COVID scenario made most of us to do faceless banking, right? Many of us are moved away from face-to-face banking. So my question is, and I think Mr. Narendra also mentioned, but not sufficiently. My problem, which I want you to address, is how do you change the mindset of the banker in the public sector system? Primarily, I'll put some 4 or 5 data points for you to comment on. One, if you look at the traditional banking system, it was always based on certain assumptions. One, cost arbitrage. Second, you had an advantage of face-to-face banking. Third, they were very strongly focused on location of the branch. For example, infrastructure was very important. And the fourth was the most important thing is the clerk to officer ratios have been very adverse in the banking system, especially public sector with the private sector. The private sector ratios are 1 is to 17. There is one clerk for 17 officers, whereas in public sector bank is still 1 is to 1 as of 2018-19 data. So my question to you is, sir, how are you going to change the mindset of a public sector banker to go out and meet customers and not focus on what happens when the customer walks in? There's a fundamental change we need to bring. I want you to share your experience in IBA as also in CBI and what is the changes we need to do, both from the government end and also CEOs of banks, CMDs of banks, what they should do.
So let me first thank Mr. Amit, who literally dragged me here. And so you will appreciate that if we have agreed to come here, there is no mindset issue with the public sector banker. Let me clarify this at the outset. Uh, I mean, I don't want to get into defense or comparison. The situation, I mean, what Mr. Narendra said, I'll just like to crystallize. The average age of the bank employees was on the very higher side, maybe 10 years back. Today, you'll be very happy to note that the average age of the banker is substantially reduced. And post consolidation, I think there is absolutely no challenge of a dearth of employees being available. Now, when you are having this, whether there is a proper focus on upskilling and reskilling of the people is the major issue that you should really address. And when you say upskilling and reskilling towards technology as well as the new kind of a products which the customers really look for. Now, let me tell you whether it is a CRM, whether it is a wallet share, it's all being talked about in the public sector at different levels. But you are very right that our comfort was that walk-in customers were there. Our comfort was face-to-face banking. Now, today I will say that probably every public sector bank has adopted almost all those technological tools which are very essential. Now, only having a technological tool is not enough. At the back of the technology tool, somebody has to look at it, somebody has to assess it. And I think the kind of a versatility which public sector uh, people develop over the period of moving different places and different engaging with a different environment, that in fact is much more important in today's context. With regard to the capacity building in the banking industry, I would like to bring out your attention to the capacity building committee under Mr. Gopal Krishna, which was created in 2015. And I was incidentally a part of that committee in the Reserve Bank. And the committee was not only for public sector, it was the banking industry. And we have identified that if you want the people to operate in credit, if you want the people operate in the risk or in the forex or in the audits and all, there has to be mandatory certification. So a lot of efforts have gone into mandatory upskilling and reskilling of the people. And thus, to be very frank today, uh, I don't think there is a mindset related issue with the public sector bank at all. Yes, probably the public sector employees are required to, I will say that. The point which I wanted to drive in that the capacity building efforts have been done at all levels. It's not only that. I think Mr. Narendra also talked to you about 75 identified general managers from the public sector industry were identified and were exposed to the IIM Bangalore for 1 year course, and it was all a virtual course. Let me tell you that these general managers, after doing their day's work, used to attend the virtual programs and they have prepared themselves. So I think with regard to their alignment and exposure to the present day market requirement, it's very much there. What is actually a real challenge, Mr. Muralidharan? The difference is the legacy part. If you really look at, when you look at the competing public sector and private sector banks, the public sector banks are carrying the legacy of 100 years. The private sector banks are having hardly about 20 years, 94 onwards. Only few out of the old generation banks you can say that yes, they are also there. And thus, I very strongly feel that what next is to be done. You may be aware that last 3 years, uh, in order to address this particular issue, the DFS have engaged the public sector banks into a program called EASC, that is Excellence in Access and Service, and it's all towards driving the services to the customers using technology, more and more technological usage. And as rightly said by Mr. Narendra, today if you talk to any bank out of the remaining 12 banks, now today got only 12 public sector banks, you will say that out of which those are operational, and again two will get into the privatization, whatever it is. But all these banks have adopted the technology at its hilt. Let me tell you, at least the top 8 banks, I can say that their technological applications and their engagement is absolutely at par. And let me tell you, I am operating in the technology world as a consultant for last about 5 years after my IBA tenure. I'm a strategy consultant with the Swift India. Uh, what you are seeing, PSB 59 minutes, I've been the mentor for that from the day one, Capita World, and who have adopted it to start with. And thus, let me tell you that mindset should be the past, but how do you prepare? And as I said, the best opportunity is now when your average age of the employee has substantially reduced. You got the youngsters who are fronting in the branches, whether face to face service or a back office service or technological service. I think, and they are all very, very eager to do what the competitors are doing. I think this is what is my take, and thus I'm absolutely convinced that today they are in the position to give. Today only I'll give you that today the results have come on the digitization of the transactions. Government of India circular has come, which luckily came to me in this afternoon, and Central Bank of India is leading, which itself is a wonder to me, because Central Bank of India has been the last bank to do the core banking among the public sector banks. But if their adoption of the
I guess we have lost his connection. So, before moving ahead, I would like to introduce Mr. V.S. Radhakrishnan, who is the Deputy Managing Director of SBI. Also, we have with us Mr. Kishore Pariyar, who is the GM, General Manager of RBI, and Mr. Murli Ramakrishnan, who is the MD CEO of South Indian Bank. I would like to welcome you all, sir.
Thank you so much. I'm going to ask Murli Krishna Garu, South Indian Bank. I think you heard both these gentlemen speaking about preparedness of of set of people. The numbers are very large. You know, the total number of banking employees is 13 lakh employees, and the major segment today in the banking industry is about officers and clerks. They are the front ending with the customers. So I raised the issue of mindset because our company, we work with very large number of training of people in the private sector banks, and we have also worked with Central Bank of India 2 years ago. And I find that competency-wise, man to man, I think public sector banks probably are better off than even private sector banks, because the quality of people they're able to attract is better. But I think still there's an issue of mindset. So I would like you to share, sir, from South Indian Bank perspective, what are the things you are doing in your bank to bring in more and more customer focus? How do you get more and more customer alignment at the branch operating level? Over to you, sir.
First of all, let me give you a quick background of me. I actually had taken over as MD and CEO of this bank from 1st of October. It's about 6 months since I had taken charge, 7 months since I had taken charge of this bank. And prior to this, I was working for ICICI Bank for over 20 years. And I have been in various parts of the bank, both domestically and internationally. And I have held various positions in ICICI Bank as business head, as risk head, and as credit head, etc. So I've been part of the growth story of ICICI Bank from early 2000 to wherever it is. So I retired from ICICI Bank in 2020 in May, and I joined this bank in July as advisor and took over as MD from 1st of October. So it's about 7 months since I had taken over this bank as MD and CEO of the bank. Sir, as you pointed out rightly, this bank is one of the banks which old private sector bank which has a long tradition of more than 90 years. It was started quite way back, and it has seen lots of changes and evolution happening in the banking industry, etc. And what it is experiencing now in the midst of so many changes happening, in the midst of so many changes happening, not only domestically but internationally, thanks to the pandemic, etc. I think we are in a very, very interesting phase. Well, after I took over, some of the things which I had observed, which probably echoes with what the earlier speaker also talked about. The average age of employees, even in this bank, is quite less. It's about 32 years. So whenever I go to branches and regional office, I find a lot of youngsters who are professionally qualified, who are people with professional backgrounds like CA, MBA, engineers, who are now more than 50-60% of the employee base. They are quite young, and these are kids who are actually looking for guidance and direction from because they're willing to learn, they're willing to put in their required efforts, etc. So I think the phase at which we are in is basically to look at transforming this bank so that we can not only move this bank to the next phase of growth in terms of preparing it for the future ready banks, which is one of the topics which I thought quite relevant also as we are talking. So when we talk about the future ready banks, obviously we are talking about the type of customers who would be very technologically savvy, who would want to be serviced through digital channels, who would prefer products which should be very much like what today they get it either in internet or any of the Amazons of the world. So that's the way they are looking at even banking service today. So how do you prepare your bank for meeting up with those requirements is essentially the challenge which I think all the banks which will face, including the banks like us which have got some legacy issues also. So as a part of transforming the bank into preparing it for the future, one of the things which I am focusing on is capability building, which is very much in tune with the topic which you are discussing. So when we talk about capability building or competency building, I think this is quite different for different layers of employees. When you're talking about layers at the lower level, which is basically customer facing, people who are in the branches, people who are in the regional offices, who are customer facing employees, that's one level of employees we are talking about. Second set of people are people who are at the supervisory level, who are either heading a function or heading a division or heading a bigger region or a zone. That's one level of employees. And then the third set is the team, which is basically driving and implementing the strategies formed by the top management team. So the capability requirements of each of these layers is very different. So the way I look at basically tying in with what the banking future banks would need is essentially on 3-4 big areas. One is there is too much of a reliance now on digital and analytical capabilities because tomorrow customers are not going to be dependent on walking into a bank to ask for a product, etc. I think unless the banks are proactively approaching the customer as to what he needs or what she needs and are able to use their analytics to figure out what the customer would want, I don't think they'll be running even in the race to get a customer. So today, the capability which is required is a huge analytical capability for which we need to have a data science division, which is probably not there in many of the traditional banks. Therefore, it's important to set that up, which can do a lot of analytics in the area of liabilities, in the area of assets, retail assets, and even in the area of products like collections, in the area like capital consumption, because there are advanced analytic studies which can be done to figure out how capital can be effectively used for various businesses so that the capital can be rationed for the right business. When you are looking at ROE, benchmark ROE for a bank to perform, you really need to rationalize your capital and allocate it to businesses which really would need that kind of capital for growth. So analytical capability is one important aspect. The second important aspect, I think the relationship skill is not going to go away because there would be amongst the set of customers there would be many, if not many, at least some who would still would want a relationship, would want a flesh and blood bankers to be servicing them, who would look at banking executives as an advisor for their financial requirement. So relationships are not going to go away. So when we need to prepare these youngsters for building relationship skills, we need to really equip them with the skills which are required for understanding customers' requirement. We need to make them listen more. We need to make them educate the customer. We need to make them enable customers start using advanced products. Many times it may not be self-driven digital product, but it could be a employee-assisted digital product which they might be needing. So this is where I think we need to prepare the young customer base for handling relationship skill, taking into account the sensitivity of the customers who they will be servicing. The third thing which is very important is customers are not looking at each product offering as a bundle. They would be actually looking at the bank to be a solution provider for them. So one bank should be meeting the entire service or product requirement of a customer. How does the bank prepare itself to present one face to the customer is going to be very, very important. For that, I think customer insight, customer analytics is very important. Understanding the where is the customer life cycle today, what is the next best product for him, what is the kind of channel which we want to be serviced on, what kind of product offering would suit him the best, in what stage of life is he in, therefore what kind of products would be relevant for him. All this becomes extremely interesting and tricky requirement which has to be assessed by the bank through its detailed analytics, for which I think data science is going to be extremely critical. And finally, I think we need to understand that at the end of the day, we need to make use of a good diversified workforce to make the bank really get its best from its employees. Therefore, women workforce, which today is a critical requirement identified by almost every industry today, to say that there should be a equal representation or more representation of women at every layer, and even at the board level. There are many international companies are insisting on saying that X number of board members should be from women folk. I think that brings in a set of different challenges, I would say. So today, when competent young women employees join a workforce, how does the bank equip itself to ensure that their responsibilities and their duties as an employee of a bank, how it has to be met by the offering which the bank can provide to such a competent workforce, so that they can make better use of those workforce. So I think more and more of infrastructure requirement for taking care of their future requirements of women workforce, counseling, mentoring, and go-to employees for many of their requirements. I think all those are going to be extremely important if we really want to make use of the talent force available in the form of women workforce. I think by and large, I would say that future ready bank has to really think about analytical skills in a big way, digital in a big way, building competencies of various layers of workforce in a different way. How does the bank present itself as a one face to the customer's requirements, and how does the bank prepare itself for proactively working on what the customer would need, and finally making the best use of its employee workforce. I think all these are important in its own self, and one needs to come up with initiatives to really grow in each of these areas to make the bank future ready. This is what I would like to submit, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I think you have summarized future ready bank concept. I'm going to ask Mr. Taneja. Central Bank is a very large bank, and you're the general manager holding a very senior position there. How ready are your bank, for example? What's been your experience? How ready is Central Bank for the future? How ready are the employees at all levels? It's not enough to train a few set of people to IIM Bangalore. We have to train a large number of, the number of employees. And I just want to read out some statistics for all of us to know. There are about 13.8 lakh employees as of 2018, that's the data I have. Out of them, 8.59 lakhs are from public sector banks, and about balance are from private sector banks. That is 4.2 lakh people. Ratio of officer to 95% were bank officers in private sector, whereas in a bank, public sector bank was 50-50. So you will understand, on the other side, public sector banks are also going through transformation in terms of inducting new people who come into the system right now. So I want to ask Mr. Taneja, what are your views? Where is your bank, and How is bank coping with all the changes? Over to you, sir.
Thank you for inviting me. First of all, we should understand what central bank was 30, 40 years back and now what we are. When I joined the bank 5 years back, we were having a business of around 10 to 15,000 crore only. And the staff strength of the bank was around 50,000 employees at that time. Now we are having a business of more than 5 lakh crore rupees, and the total staff strength is around 30,000 only. So you can understand that we have grown by 35 times in terms of business, but we have reduced the staff by 50%. So we have gone into a path where we have where we have took a call later on. We switched to the technological platform to different TBA and then CBS, and now we are going to AI and machine learning. And we should be basically reducing our staff, because once you take the staff in the bank at the age of 26 or 27 in public sector bank, when you are employing anybody at the age of 23 or 24 or 25, you can remove him to age of 60, whether he is an asset to you or his skill has become obsolete. You have to keep in the bank. So this is the basic problem, legacy problem, which many of the banks are facing, and our bank has also faced in the past. Now, lot of employee has superannuated, and new employee we have taken. They are much better. They know the job very well. They understand the markets also very well, and they know one more thing which our previous people were not knowing. They are impatient. You take a very I will give you an example of advertisement. If some new thing come on the TV, the person or the younger generation, I will say millennium, he sees the advertisement and immediately gives the order on Amazon or whatever sites are there, and his those things are delivered in a day. So that type of TAT is wanted by each and everyone. So the new employees which are coming in our bank, they also feel that the culture and the system in the bank should be changed, and we should be able to deliver the things as fast as any other banks are doing. Regarding your question, we have more employees and private sector bank has lesser employee. I don't think this is really true. If you go in between the lines, you will find that many of the services by private sector bank has been outsourced, and they are not counted as their employees. In public sector bank, you cannot outsource many things because of the restrictions imposed by Government of India or unions or CVC. We are doing all the things in-house. That's why at the cosmetic level, at the upper level, you will see we have more employees. But if you count those employees also which are outsourced by them, then you will find the per employee business handled by our employee, and adding them is almost same. There is not a big difference in that.
I talked about the ratio of officer to
Harish,
clerk. That's what I talked about, not the number of
uh,
employees. The ratio, they're very adverse.
okay.
Your public sector is
Ratio
50% and 1 is to 17. The ratio of an
1 is to
officer, there are
17 clerk to officer.
17 officers for one clerk.
No. It is not like, sir.
That's what it says, private sector.
No. It is not like that. It is not like that.
वो
In
सब
our
चेंज
bank,
हो गए सर, वो सब चेंज हो गया.
in our bank,
हाँ,
it is not
तनेजा
so.
कैन से आल्सो, ये सब चेंज हो गया अभी.
It is now
या
1 is to
तनेजा जी.
1. Sir,
Yeah,
It is
and
sir,
2018.
it is 1 is to 1. And
and sir
in
Muralidharan,
this
for adding to Taneja, yeah,
Yeah.
Taneja ji, that banks what they did, they gave a out of turn to promotion to clerks, and today a clerk he can watch that if they join and within 3 to 4 years they are becoming officers. So some of them who are capable, they directly come under the officer, and some of them are coming under this route and getting into the what you call officer. So in the current environment of technology, the clerk officer work differentiation is hardly felt. So the recruitment of clerk has been reducing, and even there was one category called special assistant. The banks gave some no additional responsibility to them, and some of them decided that they will not take that additional responsibility, and some of them also passed the promotion test and got officers. So there is no further special assistant to be given and all. So I think Taneja can mention that these things have changed. And one more thing that I have
Yeah,
once
yeah.
somewhere I have seen that the new generation bank staff strength are substantially higher, but that officer or whatever, but I can say the top is heavy and all the others are not paid equally. So in we have a very transparent compensation system, whereas the new generation bank, only the top 100 will get all the benefit and others will not get much benefit. This is what I had apart other than outsourcing. Sanjay ji, correct hai?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Sir, I want to just add it. I will give you an example. In our bank, the ratio is almost 1:1, something like that. And in our corporate office, I am working in corporate office. We have around 600 employees in corporate office, and there are hardly 25 to 30 clerk working in the full corporate office. So you can see the ratio which you were discussing is not applicable in the today environment. And we also feel there is not a big difference if he is a clerk or is an officer. But once you make him the officer, his attitude and the cultural thinking and everything gets changed. His mindset gets changed. I will say if he becomes from clerk to officer, his DNA also slightly shifted. I will in that way, and he starts delivering better services. When he was a clerk, the person is same. Only when you see posting from clerk to officer, his way of working and everything gets changed. So public sector bank has changed a lot. I will say they have already changed a lot, and in the coming time, we are feeling like just like public is becoming impatient. We are also feeling if we will not shift to fintech platform or we will not be shifting to these type of technology, the time is not far away. Then when we will extinguish from the industry. So all banks are trying. We are also trying. We are also bringing LLMS platform where all the loans will be originated through those platforms only, and when we can give the approval in 9 minutes or 15 minutes or 1 hour, whatever other banks are doing. Only issue we have to see two things. You can invest in the platform whether it is a profitable or not. But you have to just basically see the cost benefit issue also. We cannot put everything on the platform where the results are very very high. So we are working in such a way. We have to see our cost also, cost to income ratio also, and if our employees can do it, we are trying to get it done from them instead of shifting to fintech platform. Because if you go to any platform or you take any cloud platform or something, the cost is there, fixed cost is there, and whether bank is able to bear that cost, that also we have to take into account. So I will not say that blindly everything should be shifted to computerized platform or this type of cloud platform. We should looking to that, but ultimately you have no option. We have to go. We have to build our organization in such a way we all work on the that platform only. Because one thing I want to clarify more. We are in the service industry. We are not in the product industry, where you need the product every time same. That is concept is generally happens in manufacturing industry, where one defect 1.1 millimeter 0.001 millimeter defect is allowed in 1 million product. If there is 1 million product, only one product should have a difference of 0.001 millimeter. Then you are a Six Sigma company. Means ki every time you have to come out with the same product. But in service industry, you have to believe every customer is different. Every customer needs are different. Every customer requirements are different. So their peoples are required. People, everything can be shifted on the fintech platform or on the cloud platform or on the CBS platform or on LLMS platform. You need customer, you need staff also, and the things which are mundane, which are mechanical, which are repetitive, those things can be shifted to those platforms. Ultimately, employees are needed in the organization, and I feel over a period of time, journalist employee will be reducing, and we will be having a specialist employee related to credit, related to forex, related to marketing, related to IT, related to law, or related to blockchain, AI, ML, whatever we are now bringing, we require that type of specialist officer instead of journalist officer in the future. So we need officers, we need employees, but the I will say portfolio of the employee will be changing over a period of time instead of the journalist employee which were we were employing 5 year back or 10 year back or 20 years back. That's the my approach.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Welcome, sir. Welcome for this program. And my question to you is more in terms of bank consolidation and digital banking. I want to hear from you. What are your views? I always keep asking companies and banks the same question: How future ready are we? Because whatever be our past success is not going to be relevant in the market of the future. So, two questions I have for you. One, how is the bank consolidation or the merger of banks playing out, and how this consolidation will prepare the banks to be more ready for the digital world of tomorrow? Over to you, Mr. Radhakrishnan.
Thank you, Muralidharan. At the outset, I would like to thank Mr. Amit Goenka and the organizers for giving an opportunity to be part of this deliberation. Thank you very much. And I also see quite a number of senior banking officials here. Mr. Narendra is a very senior person. I have traveled with him a couple of times in the flights. So it's a pleasure to be here. Coming to the issue of bank consolidation, it is a very essential thing, sir. It is not something that we can wish away with. Consolidation is very critical today because the industry, particularly so in the public sector industry, if you take a look at various business that we do, particularly in the area of lending. In the area of lending, many of us are there in the same relationship, spending too much of our time and too much of our effort, and also coordination and all becomes so difficult. One is that. Second thing is that scale. Consolidation gives you the scale. I still remember State Bank of India, of course, we are quite in terms of scale, we are quite significantly large. But what happens also is that we would like to also cap our exposure to a certain level of to extent of 20%, 30% or so, where we would like few other lenders to chip in with their own, and many other lenders large in number chip in with small, then the entire consortium becomes so large. Administration of the management consortium becomes by itself is a formidable challenge. So this consolidation in a limited sense will give the balance sheet strength for many of the banks, where they can take larger exposures. Uh, if I can take 20-30%, there can be 3-4 banks jointly can satisfy all the requirements of the large corporates. So consolidation and the corresponding skills help in terms of what kind of exposures, what kind of lending we can do domestically, as well as it gives us also higher skills, gives us also better standing in the international market to compete and also serve the Indian communities abroad, as well as being large. Still, State Bank of India by itself is still, though big, still not a significant player elsewhere in the world. In India, our scales are good, but we have to scale up a lot more to be of significant player elsewhere. So in that sense, from scales, consolidation is a very critical thing. Second and most importantly, even in terms of problem loan management, what government is also talking about creating a bad loan to move these accounts, move these problem loans. See what is happening today. The every bank, every top management time is taken away by these small banks, small exposures which are creating a lot of problems. And bad loans have a huge capability to. I mean, Mr. Narendra on the MD South Indian Bank can tell that can ask me. It takes lots of our bandwidth, lots of our time. In fact, I have been handling the SR steel, which you might have followed, which went for 700, 800 days. And I used to run the COC. It was such a large gathering, and many of the senior level engagements, which so I was at that point in time, I was thinking, what is the need for so many banks to be there? Like we used to have 10,000 crore exposure to them. many banks with 500 crores, 600 crores were there. Almost all the banks were there. And I have been in this credit area for quite some time. And Bhushan Steel or any name you call it, 30, 40 banks will be there. And large number of public sector banks, a reduced number also, all of them were there. So in that sense, the scale and the management time, overall efficiency in credit delivery, consolidation is a very important thing. Second thing also is when we do the consolidation and rationalize geographical presence, there are many places we compete, most of us compete with each other, and we don't really create incremental value to the customer in the sense that in some areas where there is concentration of bank branches, whereas there are some areas where banks are not there at all. And that kind of an anomaly is very much there in the system. With due respect, private sector banks have their own priorities in terms of being there only in places where significant opportunities exist. Whereas public sector banks still we operate for more than profit. We do have a presence. In that sense, the consolidation will give us the scales and rationalization to redeploy our resources in such a way that we can cover more and more number of people. That is one thing that I believe that consolidation will give us the scale, size to better deliver value to the country, better deliver value to our customers, and also in terms of reaching out to many people to deliver services. That is one important thing that I find in consolidation. And as to the digital capabilities, there can be no two opinion that it is a must that we as bankers today have to be at par with the best of the digital capability, have the best of the digital capabilities, whether to the extent of being called as a financial company in the fintech kind of standing. And we in State Bank of India, I'm sure that if not all of you, most of you must have used our products like UNO is a product which is just as good digitally as any other institution can claim. And we do have large number of customers who have come into our digital platform, and the variety of services that we are delivering to the customers is quite wide. And practically, like even pre-approved credit lines are given through our digital platform. And on the retail part of it, on the commercial part of it, we have a package called Business, where it is still evolving. Not that we have reached the critical stage; it is evolving, but we have started building capabilities to open trade finance like instruments like LC. Domestically, we have started doing it to have end-to-end solution of trade finance and LCs to business. That is something once we reach that critical stage, we will be able to scale up also our international trade finance business to them. In fact, sometime back, COVID is a setback on that. I was engaged with Bolero, which is associate of it, to see how we can move into platform, digital platform for international trade finance requirement, where everything will move from end to end on digital platform. In case if there is going to be at some buyer end or the seller end, there's going to be a digital link. Even that will not derail the process. The entire thing can go up to a certain point, then there will be a physical movement. So we were working on it. Maybe once we can get out of the COVID, we will definitely restart. And I find some banks are already there. Some of the foreign banks are already there. We are getting them. But we see some of the customers are also there. For example, like large corporates like Reliance Industries, and quite few number of customers are also there using such facilities. It's all blockchain kind of a model that they are using. So, in terms of digital capabilities, um, I will say that State Bank of India and some of the other public banks also are not behind others. We are quite capable. Probably two things are required. One is that we should make the world of image building is also something. Maybe we are not perceived to be digitally savvy as a bank. Probably some amount of effort on the part of public sector banks have to be taken to see that we are perceived for our strength. So in terms of digital capability, we are very much there, and it's only a matter of time that we are also perceived to be digitally strong bank. And consolidation is another thing that will help also in the digital, because digital technology or any technology for that matter requires huge investments. And being a small bank, you have your own challenges in terms of how much you can spend on technology. Skills help you in that sense also to be on digital platform. So consolidation in digital together is the way forward for the future. On top of it, these small banks vacating some of the public sector banks, more or less we do the same kind of business. This consolidation creates some space for new generation of small finance banks to fill in the gaps, and also NBFCs fill in the gap to ensure that we are able to deliver different sections of the society banking services which are really essential. This is the way I will sum up. Thank
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Mr. Joshi, welcome. I am from Telangana, so we have met once or twice. I was the
Yes.
chairperson of Telangana, so we met a few times, and good to see you in good health, Mr. Joshi. My question to you: you've been a chief secretary of the state. You've interacted with many banks in the context of priority lending, agricultural lending. From where you stand as a civil servant, and you see the importance of banking industry for the welfare of people and also economic emancipation. What are your comments on the banking industry today and where they should be going? What are your thoughts on the where the banking industry, and the context also is on human capital management? I am I'm of the view you can bring in technology, you can bring in the best products, but ultimately people have to sell them, people have to service them. So I would like you to also share your thoughts as a civil servant and a chief secretary level. What are your thoughts about the banking industry today and where it should be going? Over to you, sir.
Good evening, senior banking friends. You are the leaders of banking in terms of both private and public sector banks.
वो अगर है तो उसको
And
अपना चाय पिला दो.
as Mr. Muralidharan said, financial institutions are the backbone of the economy. I will reserve my comments as a consumer and as a policy side, what Mr. Muralidharan requested me to respond. As far as banking sector is concerned, there are two clear-cut distinct landmarks. One is pre-nationalization, and post-nationalization was one era which changed the banking industry completely. Similarly, second point was pre-computerization and post-computerization. I remember there was so much uproar, so much apprehension in the banking sector not to go for computers, that people will get unemployed, people will not have the facilities. So I remember as a consumer standing in a queue for withdrawal of money. And then later on, system improved, some token system was introduced. Now with internet banking, there is a complete metamorphosis as far as banking industry is concerned. I have couple of questions to especially public sector banks. Mr. Radhakrishnan mentioned about optimum number of banks. What is that number? Why every time we merge 6 banks, 8 banks, and then create chaos? As a country, we know that these are the number of public sector banks, and maybe 4, 5, 6, whatever number is decided. That is one point where we need clear-cut direction, because every merger creates disruption. Second point is about computerization. Previously, if a branch was inefficient, the effect was only on that branch. Now with YONO application, I think I am very harsh on saying that downtime is almost equal to the running time of YONO application. So we are making various experiments, and when you go to other banks, their applications are very poor. And technology will not wait for anybody. Technology will ensure either you perish or you improvise. So from policy side, very critical issues are there. you should be given level playing field if you have to compete with the private sector banks. Perhaps that direction is needed. All the public sector banks have done fantastic work in terms of opening Jan Dhan accounts. So compliments for that. But priority sector lending is a cause of concern, and there are various reasons. Now we talk about something like tax on withdrawals. These kind of things send a very wrong policy signal, and we should, at a policy level, we should, as a central government, we should be very clear what is the optimum number of public sector banks we would like to have once for all. Do whatever merger or submerger or demerger has to be done, and allow the private sector banks and public sector banks to level playing fields. Professionalism is a very, I mean, most of the public sector banks, State Bank barring and few other banks, they are not ready to compete with the private sector banks, the kind of offers they give, the kind of services they provide. So this is the situation. We need, one example was there, why each and every bank has to develop its own internet application or web application. It's a kind of coordination perhaps which could reduce the expenditure and which could prepare a very robust product. There are some banks which say every week or 10 days or 1 month password should be changed. There are banks who depend on so many double or triple checkup. So policy level, I think central government also has to be clear, and they should decide the optimum number of banks, and banks should also coordinate, and they should be given autonomy and professionalism. These are my initial comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Alphonse. Welcome for this special session on the focus of this topic today, sir, is on human capital management, challenges and opportunities in the banking sector. So, first of all, you've been a minister in the Union Cabinet. You've had a very large exposure at the national level. So, my first question to you, sir, is about one of the point Mr. Joshi, the Chief Secretary of Telangana. He raised the point about level playing field. I think this is going to be one of the key challenges for public versus private sector banks in India. And I want you to share your thoughts and what can we do at the national level to support and bring a level playing field. For example, hiring, there are challenges for public sector banks. Public sector banks have challenges of unionization. They have other challenges which are very endemic. So what can we do at a national level to free them, as our finance minister said, bring out the animal spirits in the public sector banks because they have a lot of good talent in them. How do we free them from all the shackles? That's what I would request you to talk about, share your thoughts as well. Over to you, sir.
Good afternoon, everybody. So, I must apologize. Really, I'm really not an expert in banking at all. I've never worked in the bank. I've been in the IAS most of my life. Then, of course, I was union minister in the last cabinet, minister for tourism, IT for some time, and now I'm a member. So I'm really not a banker, and I don't really have much of a competence to really speak on the banking sector. Obviously, the banking sector has very bright people. I remember while in college, most of my batchmates talking about being POs, and seriously, what is this PO? Then really I realized officer, and that was the ultimate thing in the university in college those days. Uh, I really went banking, and of course, I never had an inkling to do banking, and I want to do the IAS, and therefore I went for the IAS examination. So we have extremely bright people in the banking sector, and this banking is like the fueling station for the economy. I mean, this is where things happen. If you have a vehicle, unless you have fuel, it doesn't run. And of course, you're going to have the new generation cars coming in, which possibly don't need a continuous fueling. But as of now, most vehicles in India today run on fuel, and so the banking banking is the fuel of the economy, and therefore it plays the most crucial role. And in a country like India, it just not banks are just not about making profits only. Banking has a social purpose. I mean, that was precisely the reason why banks were nationalized in the early 70s by Mrs. Gandhi. And then, of course, in the 90s, when we began with the privatization of banks in certain way, or allowing private sector banks to come in a big way. I think all this has been very, very good. I think a mix of the private sector and the public sector, I think all this has been good. Somebody here has been talking about autonomy. I really think people must have the freedom, banks must have the freedom to operate within, of course, very well known protocol. I think that is so important. And I think the Reserve Bank of India in India is doing a fantastic job in terms of laying down the basic protocols, guidelines within which the banks operate. And the banks in India, therefore, have a lot of autonomy. I don't really think anybody can complain that there is no autonomy for the private sector banks in India at all. And even recently, when they fixed the tenure for the CEOs of private sector banks, I think they have been very, very liberal in fixing 15 years. And therefore, in fact, my complaint is possibly you need little better enforcement of guidelines. I mean, how would otherwise in one of the finest banks in India, massive scandal take place? I don't want to name the bank. Massive scandal take place. I mean, it's something which was much worse than insider trading, where you see personal lending and then massive kickbacks getting back to the accounts of the beneficiary. And in this case, the husband himself. And therefore, this kind of things happening, I don't really think there is a close monitoring of the banking sector by the Reserve Bank at all. Number one. Number two, even in public sector banks, with all the kind of several steps of monitoring which it has. I live in Delhi, and one of the branches of a public sector bank in Delhi, you'll be shocked. I mean, all of you know about this. Sent 5,000 crores to Hong Kong in a week. How could this happen? I mean, tell me. I mean, even in the IAS, something like this beyond a few lakh of rupees would never happen. It would come to the notice of the senior officers. How could 5,000 crores be transferred out of a bank and sent abroad? Not even within India, sent abroad. I mean, what kind of controls are we talking about? Isn't somebody lax about it, or was there a connivance at various levels of the bank itself? I mean, it points to various omissions at the banking level. Now, the social purpose of the banking sector in India, let me come to that. I think in a country like India, where you have more than 25% of people below poverty line, and today possibly because of the COVID, the numbers possibly would be much, much more. I mean, it's just not only the people below poverty line who really depends on a bank. I think everybody today needs a bank so badly. Number one, coming to that segment which really needs government assistance, and therefore most of this government assistance goes through the banks. I think one of the things which has succeeded fantastically is the direct transfer benefit system. And then this is where I think all the banks have collaborated fantastically. I'm a press of a button, and we have something like what 15 lakh crores transferred to the account of the beneficiaries at the press of a button. I think this has been a fantastic achievement of the banking sector. I think we have to give great credit to the banking sector for this. I do not think that anywhere else in the world it would have been so easy. All this has happened because I think there is a sense of commitment in the banking sector, and then the first there was a feeling of a lot of people earlier that the Reserve Bank must be a completely autonomous organization with very little control of the government. I do not agree. As a former union minister and also as a student of economics, I do not agree, because in India, the banking serves a huge social purpose, and therefore, I think whether it is a monetary policy, and of course, which has implications for the fiscal policy, all these things, I think it is very good to have a complete meeting of minds between the government and the Reserve Bank, and therefore the current system in which they have a monetary policy committee and also a former IAS officer who is there, who has a very good rapport with the government. I think that is really helped a lot. I think the monetary policy at large has been extremely good, and it has been in there's been meeting of minds and between the government and also the banking sector and also the social purpose for which the banks have at large have been set up. Now, profitability of banks, I think it's extremely important. Banks have to be profitable, and therefore, the present NPA is a cause of deep concern, not only to the government and also to the private banking sector. I think a lot of this has to do with the current pandemic. I think the NPAs which are shown today are really not the NPAs. I think after you have a due diligence done after the coronavirus is over, after the COVID is over, I think the NPA levels are going to be much, much higher than what we really see today on the balance sheet. And therefore, I basically do not think that the banking industry is in a very healthy situation as of now. I do not think so. Some of these stuff, a lot of this stuff is actually inherited pre 2014. I think where there has been a certain amount of connivance between bankers, sorry, I have to say this, between bankers and also the borrowers, where they have let them borrow without, the kind of assets which were supposed to exist. And then, of course, there has been laxity on the part of bankers covering the money. I mean, where this obviously there is also connivance in a lot of these cases between the bankers and also the borrowers. I mean, just as of course there is a lot of connivance in corruption in the country between, with of course politicians, IAS officers, and other people. Everybody, conniving together. I think there is no doubt in all this, and I think the similar of a plague. Let me use the word plague. Really, it's a little harsh word, but I understand. I think a similar plague exists in the banking sector as well, and I think these need to be sorted out. But I also see, for the time I was a district collector, so often I had to call up banks because they would not lend to the poor people. And very often, even though there are guidelines for the Reserve Bank of India that you need to lend to, let's say, to medical students and also to engineering students and all that, there have been hundreds of times where I really had to call up managers and then their seniors to ensure that the lending to such people exists. Because even though the guidelines say that you don't need to have any property to be mortgaged, you don't need to have a security, a surety, but still many of the banks would insist on that, and therefore I think there has been problem. I do agree there is a problem of recovery of these loans, but is the recovery of loans in the education sector, is it much worse than lending to the industry? I do not think so. I mean, is recovery of money lent to the poor people is worse than the money which is lent to the industrial sector? I have my serious doubts. And therefore, if you lend to the poor, well, you won't get it back. I think that kind of a psychology, possibly thinking, possibly is not true, because I do not have the exact accounts, but I think possibly that is not true. And there is always been a psychological issue in this by the banking sector at large. How do we lend to the poor? Anyway, I think in a lot of cases, the managers have been in line. Banking sector has been in line with the government, I should say, and they have been able to achieve more or less targets which have been laid down by the government, and therefore banking sector by and large has reached the poorer segments. But though of course there is reluctance by the bankers to lend to such people which is unsecured. I think these are extremely difficult times. I think the problem today with the banking sector is you have so much of liquidity, and the repo rates and the reverse repo rates are so low. Historically, I think the lowest. But still, I think there are no takers for the loans because we are not sure about the future. Nobody's sure about the future. I got COVID. I'm fortunate to be alive. My wife at present has COVID. I mean, she's fine. My mother died of post-COVID complications. So we live in an extremely uncertain world. So I think things are going to be extremely difficult post-COVID. But let me urge the bankers. This is really the time to lend. The small industry, the SMEs, SMSP sector is extremely in problem difficulties, and we really need to lend a helping hand. See, in most of European countries and in the US, like my son runs a company in the US, and the salary of all his staff is getting paid by the government. My another son lives in London. He was the head of technology for one of the big companies in UK, Indian companies, and just closed up overnight. So he's on a furlough, and the government pays half the salary, and that is paid by the government. And unfortunately, possibly our physical limits don't permit such payment for running private companies by the government in India, because we don't have that kind of a flexibility. We are not such a large economy which can possibly afford that. But I think we need to really look at linking to the small sector, to the tiny sector and the micro sector very compassionately. I'm using the word compassionately because I really think a lot of people are going to sink unless you people help out. And this is where I think the quality of the human capital in the bank is so important. I think we got to be compassionate. And this is one of the things which I regularly go and speak at the IAS Academy, because I keep telling them, the most important thing is not your brilliance. I mean, I don't consider to be myself to be a very brilliant person, but I was one of the toppers of the IAS. I was on the cover of Time magazine in 1994. So it's just not really the necessarily the gray matter alone which is important. I think it's sense of compassion that we need to really help people. We need to take everybody along, and the banking sector plays such a crucial role in really realizing the dreams of the country. And I think, therefore, I think a sense of compassion, and I think a little more sense of possibly decency. I mean, I walk into a bank if I unannounced, and it's so difficult to get bankers to smile. Why can't we smile? One of the things which I learned very early in my years is that I don't have solutions to every problem, but at least I can smile. I mean, I can at least get up and say, "Oh, come on, sit down, smile, sit down." I can take a call from everybody. I mean, even as a minister, I can tell you 100%. I've taken every call that is come. As of now, before I speak to you, there's not one call which I have not answered. I don't know how many of you take your own calls. I mean, you look at the true caller and see if is it a number which I recognize. I'm sorry. As a responsible citizen of India, given with a huge responsibility, do I take calls only from people whom Truecaller says I know them? Not at all. I think the people who are not on Truecaller, who can't be identified, who doesn't even have a mobile phone, I think it's that person whom I need to talk to much better. I think a sense of compassion, a sense of being friendly. I think that's missing in the banking sector. I mean, I know when big people walk into banks, I'm sure there is a big smile. But when that tiny little man with a torn shirt or a sari walks into the bank, how many of us bother to offer a cup of coffee? Because when the guy with the big deposit walks in, obviously you offer a cup of coffee. Do we offer him a cup of coffee? Do we ask him even to sit down? Does the manager bother to come out of the chamber and say, "Come on, I know you have a problem and you need special help"? Can that come a bit of compassion in the banking sector? I think I said the same thing to my IAS colleagues. Can't we smile a lot more? Can't we just listen a lot more? Why do we presume we are the only people with ideas? One of the things which I did as district collector was the mass conduct program, which eventually went on to being to get the highest UN award for best governance practice. You know where the idea came from? An 80-year-old lady walked into my home when I was a collector and told me, "Why don't you come and meet me in my district?" That set off the mass conduct program, in which I would take the entire district, including bankers, to a designated panchayat, all petitions received earlier, and sort out problems. I think this country, be it the banking sector, be it the government, be it politicians, be it bureaucrats, I think we all need a much bigger dose of compassion, a sense of taking decisions. I mean, rules are meant to deliver things. I can tell you I've broken rules left, right, and center, but I would write long notes as to why I'm breaking a rule, because I believe I'm here to deliver, not to quote a rule to a poor man or to anybody, even to the rich man. I mean, Just because I speak about the poor, don't presume that I don't do work for the rich people. No, sorry, I do their work as well. It's my job as an administrator to do their job as well. Of course, we go to offer them a cup of coffee. It's so important. I think it's a question of a more compassionate country being there. I think the biggest link to creating that compassionate nation, I think, is the banking sector. I think this is where the human capital in the banking sector needs to be kind of, oriented a little more. And then, of course, decision making process. I see so often bank managers saying, "Sorry, I've sent it up to the top." you know, do take decisions. I mean, and write long notes as to why you are taking a decision. When you have to break a rule, break a rule. I know. I'm just conclude with quoting one thing. When I was a district collector, two young boys walked into my office and said, "Sir, there is a child dying in our area who is not getting blood transfusion because the parents do not believe in blood transfusion." Is there any rule which empowers the district collector to issue an order to the police? No. But I just called my secretary. My steno issued a two-line order saying this child has the right to live irrespective of the religious belief of the parents. Take the child into custody and give him blood transfusion in the medical college, which the police did. Now tell me, is there any rule in the world which permitted me to do that? No. I just created a rule. I just did it. I saved a human life. So, my dear bankers, very, very happy to be here on this day. You are so important, all of you. You have the brains, more than enough brains. You have the capacity. So, please, I think more than ever today, the nation needs you. So, all the very best. Thank you so much for inviting me here.
Thank you so much, Mr. Alphonse. I think you've spoken eloquently about smiling and compassion. I'm going to ask Mr. Rajesh Sham, I think is not spoken so far. I think the point I would like to make a request to you, so Mr. Rajesh Sham also can talk about it. There's also compassion required to bankers in India. I want to make a strong case today in front of you. You're a lawmaker and a member of Rajya Sabha. I think there is a very little compassion to the banker in this country. They are the people who are frontline workers. They are not treated on par with many of the frontline workers. For example, vaccination. There were a lot of debates on whether bankers should be treated on par with other frontline workers for vaccination. There are many issues in terms of insurance coverage for the bank official who's sitting in front line. And you said correctly when you talk about meeting a variety of people with compassion, you're allowed to have a lot of face-to-face contact. So my first submission and request to Ajay Shamsi to talk about is that why is it that we do not give the freedom and empowerment to a bank official so that he can make the right choice and also respect him as one of the most critical players? On one level, we give a lip service at the top level saying banking is important, but the bank employee is not important. That's a big, real challenge. We have spoken to a large number of bank employees, and the repeated messages at the end of the day, we are left carrying the can in terms of decision. I'll give you one example, Mr. Alphonse, since you mentioned about it. Do you know the banker can be hauled up 20 years later for the lending that he did 20 years ago? There's no statute of limitation on the lending that a banker does. How can they have no statute of limitation on that? The law doesn't permit because it's a criminal offense. Can open up anything, any duration of time. So anyway, I'm leaving that. I'm asking Mr. Rajesh Sham to share some thoughts on what can we do to empower the bank employee? How can we make him the hero in this conversation? Over to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Muralidharan. There are 3 points which I wanted to make. I heard the deliberations, discussions, and views from the very beginning. The human resource management, the internal management, the use of technology, all these things the bankers are doing well. But there are 3 focus areas which I would like to bring to the focus. The first and foremost is the moral of the banking staff, the banking officers. There is a general sense of fear. When I interact, I have been secretary in the irrigation, I have been secretary in government of India also. And when I interact with the contractors, I interact with the industry, I interact with the SMSEs. They say that even getting a bank guarantee is next to impossible. You have to deposit equivalent amount because the banker, and when you talk to the banker says, "Sir, what happens if we fail? If we fail, we don't want to go to jail." Now, the issue that Mr. Alphonse has raised, we should lend, but does the lender have the courage to lend? Does he have the confidence that he will not be hauled up if the money goes back? During the time of crisis, there is a greater probability of the money going bad. During the normal times also there is a certain risk. So now all the bankers have they are gone into self-defense and ensuring that post-retirement and even during the service they don't go to jail. This fear psychosis needs to be addressed on priority. Now you can't have enforcement directorate, you can't have CBI, you can't have police, you can't have everybody chasing the banker or for that matter industry. You have to have some sort of belief and faith in the system. There may be some bad people, but then examine them thoroughly before going public, before arresting them, before starting registering criminal cases. At least do the proper investigation. Look at the success rate of enforcement directorate cases. Look at the success rate of CBI. 20 years or 10 years or 5 years old cases. I was just reading online during the deliberations on the Nero Modi case. How long we will continue to take investigations on? So first and foremost, the need of the time is to create a sense of belief, confidence, so that you take a decision on merit, allow bona fide mistakes. And when you take a decision, just consider that everybody in the sector, everybody in the society is not corrupt. Even honest and upright persons do make mistakes. Do they have the freedom to make a mistake? If they don't have the freedom to make a mistake, then the lending will not pick up. The second issue is the grassroots level of corruption. There is hardly any scheme of the government where money goes to the beneficiary without bribing the banker. It's extremely difficult to draw the money at the village level or at the local level or at the ward level or municipal level without bribing the banker. To get a Kisan card, you need to put in 20% to get a Kisan card. Now, what are we doing with that? Are the banks alive as to what level of corruption the bankers have got into? And are they doing anything to control and to regulate and to see into how they resolve this issue? This, when you interact with any person who is getting any relief, even people when they go to the bank to withdraw the money which is coming under the Pradhan Mantri Kisan Yojana, 6,000 rupees per hectare per year that the farmers are getting, or even when you get your direct benefit transfers. I have been development commissioner and National Chief Secretary of Panchayat Rural Development in Madhya Pradesh. Even the panchayats had to pay money to the banker to get their bills cleared online. We made 100% pen transactions online, and State Bank of India and Central Bank of India, they came full-heartedly and made everything online. Panchayats don't need to maintain their accounts. Everything goes, including the vouchers, and every digital record is kept. But even then, there are banks and bankers who are charging money. The third and the equally important issue is we are winding up or reducing the coverage of banks in the villages and rural areas, because every bank has to become a profit center. Now, somewhere the cross subsidization has to take place. So, if we keep closing down our ATMs, we keep closing down or restricting the transactions, particularly in rural areas, just think of a weekly wages when you receive under NREGA, and your account gets credited and you get weekly wages, and if you have restrictions on drawal of wages and then you are charged for ATM, you are giving him 200 rupees a day. And if he gets for 4 weeks and he withdraws for 8 times, then you debit his account. So these are the issues, the 3 prominent issues which should be incorporated into the human resource management and the human resource policy of the bank. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think we have seen Mr. Sanjeev is back. I think you've been the Director General of the Lal Bahadur Shastri. Am I correct, sir? IS Academy. Were you the Director General of that?
Yes, I was.
Yeah, thank you so much. Nice talking to you. One of my batchmates, Rajiv Kapoor, was also there in the academy quite some time ago. I'm from Ahmedabad 81 batch. My batchmate Rajiv Kapoor was there in Lal Bahadur Shastri.
Okay.
Stayed in for several years.
Oh, yes.
He's a good friend. He's a batchmate of mine. So
and
we
Sanjeev
understand.
Sanjeev Chopra and myself, we are batchmates.
Yes. Wonderful.
Batchmates.
Good to have you. Yeah, good to have you, sir. I think I'm going to ask you a more direct question, and I think we are debating this for a long time, and my viewpoint is still the same, that you can bring in technology to bank, you can bring in legislation, but unless you change people's mindset, I think Mr. Alphonse talked about mindset changing of serving the poor. That's one important mindset. And behind that mindset is the risk of lending and how my career will be jeopardized. So mindset change you've been doing in the academy, you've been part of the training. What can we do to change the mindset of the average banker on the ground level? How can we make him more proactive, more customer centric, more poor centric, more compliance? Because compliance is again a big issue today. So, what would be your advice from your experience in running academy? What will you be? What are your thoughts on that, Dr. Sanjeev?
Thank you, Murli. And first of all, let me tell you, we are only directors, we're not director generals.
Okay.
And I think I'm happier to have retired as director of the academy.
Okay.
Now, in management, as you're aware, we have something called the Pygmalion effect. George Bernard Shaw had mentioned about the Pygmalion effect, and then you saw My Fair Lady, in which the whole thing was that it is not what I am; it is how I am treated. I think the most important thing for all of us would be to first of all extend to the banker the respect, the dignity, and the honor that is due to him or her. One of the things that we often do is that we tend to think that the banker is some sort of a person on whom we can exert pressure and get things out. Now, the fact is that banking is a professional task. Unless all of us, from the BDO to the finance secretary of the country, realize that the banker is also doing a professional job, we will not be able to make much headway. You cannot get the banker, you cannot get him to force to issue Kisan credit cards or artisan credit cards or do various other things. And I can share with you that there have been bankers and bankers and bankers because Julania did mention, RS did mention about the many ways in which the banks are corrupt, but I would also like to highlight that there are many ways in which banks have done extraordinary work. I often give the example of Mr. Huda, who transformed the SHG movement in Dehradun district. Later on, I was in some ways instrumental in making him the head of the Uttaranchal State Cooperative Bank, and we were able to do phenomenal work. So I think one of the main issues is that of trust. We need to trust our banker, just as we need to trust everybody. You see, one of the big problems I think in the way we run in the way we govern our system is that we are moving into a very instructional society. Everything must be told. This is what should be done. This is what should be taught. This is how it should be taught. Now, this is a very, very colonial system. In fact, I have also protested at various points of time that look, you cannot even. I mean, even for the IS, and why is the syllabus prescribed? I mean, at all, what is it that you need to teach in the academy? All we need to teach in the academy, if you ask me, is leadership, negotiation, and communication. We still go on teaching, basic economics and basic management, which is not required. The general principle which I am talking is, and it's a general principle which applies not just to banking sector, it employs to health professionals, it relates to police, it relates to the revenue functionaries. As a nation, we have to learn to trust the person who is working for us. And we should not be making blanket statement that he is corrupt and he is corrupt, because in my own lifetime, I've seen very good people and I've seen not so good people. But in general, I would think that there are a lot of very, very positive people in our systems. And one more thing which I'd like to share is that the public sector banks are doing a sterling job. I mean, they may not have the same chutzpah or the same, jazz which the private sector creates about it. But having dealt with both public sector banks and private sector banks, I would put my money with the public sector bank, not just because it is guaranteed by the government, but because systems and processes have been fairly, they have been codified. Now, one impression could be that because one has been in the IS, one has always got, good treatment from the bank, as Mr. Alphonse said, that we don't know how one would have been treated if one was not in the services. But let me tell you that this same thing applies to a police station. It applies to a hospital. It applies to any government office. So why are we singularly? So I would suggest, in fact, that we should be, as a society, respectful, not just to bankers but to everyone around, and that is how we can create a positive cycle of good in our situations. So whether it is a COVID situation, now I find that we are being overly critical of everything. Let's do whatever we can do to resolve things. Baba, we have a Ramakrishna mission here. They had an eye hospital. We converted into a COVID hospital. Not that 40 beds is going to make a major difference, but these 40 beds are going to make a difference to at least 40 people. So, if all of us, bankers and all of, I think I'll go back to Pygmalion effect, which George Bernard Shaw had mentioned. And I think we should spread a positive Pygmalion effect amongst bankers and amongst everybody in this country to be able to get out of not just the current crisis, but even later. Thank you very much. I'm glad that I got the opportunity to talk to all of us. Thank you.
Thank
And
you. Thank
Rajiv
you.
Kapoor and I go a long way. In fact, he
Okay.
was a
And
deputy director with me many years ago. We were colleagues. And then, of course, he was my grand predecessor also at the academy. And whatever, it's always difficult to to talk after Radhesham because he is sort of the spark of a batch. He gets all the points in. But thank you very much. Thank you, sir.
thank you, Dr. Kapoor. That's a lovely way of sharing your thoughts. I want to leave this. I call Radhakrishnan Garu. I think you're in a position to talk to employees of your bank or many of the public sector banks. What would you tell them today? That what can they do to what Mr. Alphonse said to take care of the poor, what Dr. Kapoor said, spread the positiveness and have faith and do something for the community. What would be your advice to many bank employees who may be watching this program? Over to Radhakrishnan, sir.
Yeah, thank you. And I think the inputs from the senior officers were fantastic. Actually, as a banking sector, right now I'm in the midst of doing something which I'm sure I should tell. We have identified some three critical supply chains in the oxygen supply to the hospitals, producers, and transporters. And my entire team is now trying to connect all over the place to those to see where all we can on a urgent basis pump in money to enhance or augment their capacities, be it hospitals. And we have spent some time yesterday evening to get some inputs on what could be the costing for different hospitals. And we have segregated the hospitals into ABC category to ensure that these things move. Like we are slightly weak in terms of funding transport operators. So we are also talking parallelly to some of the financial institutions like NBFCs like Shriram Transport and a few other people who are financing transport operators, because that's an area where they're slightly behind. And producers of oxygen and all we are talking, and also we are connecting to the branches to see whether they can identify some hospitals in their territory to see whether we can on an urgent basis create value in terms of what we can do to save the life. There's nothing much economics about it. There's nothing much profit about it. This is about how we can using our huge network to service the society. This is what is right now the current project that I'm on. In between also people are coming and so the message that I will tell my people, I also have some statistics of some of our people how despite all these challenges as you are rightly articulating sometime back, the contribution of frontline bankers is quite phenomenal. We have fairly large number of people we have lost to COVID, and though we are all frontline clerical staff and officers who are serving large number of people. One of my junior colleagues who was working in a branch which is just in front of government hospital in Chennai. He fell sick and of course we somehow we could get him out of it, fortunately. But then more than half of the branch was affected by COVID, and still, notwithstanding all that, the rest carried on business. So the message is that despite the challenges that we are facing as a society, we are in the forefront in doing our job as an essential service provider in whatever best way we can. Notwithstanding the challenges, we are very much there. And my message to my colleagues will be, yes, this is a moment, a testing moment where we should stand up to our own colleagues, stand up to our own people, and see what best we can do to create the support system that we can do, and parallelly stay safe. So ensure that you adapt to the challenges in terms of security, social distancing, masks, and all that which is being advised to us, and be there on the spot to see what best we can do. And take me on that. We are just doing everything that is possible humanly by the banking people. And we, State Bank, and they have such a large network. We are delivering on our commitment to people in this moment of difficulty. So that's what I would like to say. It's quite a challenging task, and we are up to that.
Thank you. I'm going to now close the session with Mr. Narendra. He's been the first speaker. So thank you very much. And you can close this session with your thoughts. I think you've been patient. You've been there for 1.5 hours now, 1 hour 45 minutes. I appreciate your time, sir. And would you like to sum it up as to what would you like to tell bank employees and bank leadership, especially? How would they all should work together to manage the next 5 years, and especially the next 1 year, and thereafter the next 3-4 years of transformation? What will be your closing comments, sir? Narendra?
Yeah, I am really grateful to some of the senior IAS officers having noticed the what you call the good work done by the bankers. And in fact, our Honorable Finance Minister, as well as earlier our Prime Minister, also have appreciated the role played by the public sector bank, particularly not only during this COVID, in bringing around 41 crores of Jan Dhan Yojana account and connecting the Aadhaar and mobile and RuPay card and all in and insurance all in a record time, hardly 3 months. And today, by a click of button, the entire all the government schemes during, particularly even during COVID, that has transferred to end all those accounts very quickly. And the operations also have now reached 85, and a majority of those accounts are by women. So when national demand is made, or in genuinely reaching to the unreached, like I am also reminded of an example of having a campaign, one smile campaign in IOB, as well as reach to the unreached. And house to house, our people have gone and made them to reach to the account and have the financial inclusion account. So, and in fact, the financial inclusion was shown by the public sector bank, first from the Indian Bank, I think when our late Dr. K.C. Chakravarti was there. And they were the first to open a branch in a slum area in Mumbai. So that cannot be underestimated, the capacity of the public sector employees. And in fact, all the new generation banks took over the public sector, some of the specialists in forex or in branch management or in regional leadership. And today, the private sector bank can definitely watch that inbuilt capacity, what you call skills and capability of the public sector bank, and that is continuing. And one I could also, Radhakrishna is there, we have to appreciate a bank like State Bank of India has a large exposure with India and global. Even in the overseas branch, it is the public sector bank have reached to the various parts of the international, including South Africa, Bank of Baroda, Bank of India, and some of the, wherever we had the country to country relation, they opened the bank and provided banking services not only to the Indians there, but also to the Indian corporates. And in fact, the except ICICI Bank, I think both the other bank, that is HDFC and Axis, they don't have much presence in abroad, and they are really very limited. And earlier we were talking about digitalization, and that some our I think Telangana Chief Secretary mentioned that there are downtime and all. But in fact, Muralidharan, this is the recently, I cannot mention the name, leading new generation bank had to have embargo by the Reserve Bank of India for a continuous failure in the digital as well as their credit card, debit card and all. And they had almost 1 year, and there is a special inspection and all. So this type of what you call up and down, when you enhance the volume, that do happen. And similarly, in the area of success, I could, my own experience, I could say that under the Prime Minister Employment Guarantee Scheme, some of the one young generation entrepreneur who was helped in it is in Rajkot, and later he has become CNC machine what you call manufacturer, not only India as well as in abroad. Similarly, one of my colleague for helped by maybe initially as a overdraft or temporary overdraft, that company grown and today it is one of the leading what you call company that is and the promoter later sold that company for and realized 2000 crores. So what happened, there are some of the corporates also I have seen where we gave the initial, today they have become what you call MNC type of corporate. So there are, same with the case with the State Bank or Canara Bank or most of the banks. And when we, these recent default and some of the what you call various fraud and other things, this is unfortunate. Some of them misuse the system or the banks and all of them, including all corporates, cannot have that type of facility by new generation banks. They only take the creamy nature of the business, and it is the public sector bank who are given such a support to the infrastructure. And this is the same employees at the all level, and the infrastructure has grown substantially. And in the current government plan of NIP, National what you call infrastructure plan, I am sure that bank like State Bank or bigger size banks will play important. And the question of merger, I think when we are all owned by the government of India and our capitals are to be provided either by inner what you call accrual or by the government of India being the majority there, by being a merger and having a better size, and there what you call that capital can be optimized, and your similarly technology cost can be reduced, and you could rationalize the various other unnecessary expenditure, and the scale and size as Sadakshan has put in various areas of credit, and that's where now it will help. And that's where today the national asset company that what you call bad bank or whatever, that is coming so that the aggregation can be done. So government has made a strategic and non-strategic policy, and they think they have mentioned that in the strategic area of including bank there will be 4. So even by the 4 like other than State Bank of India, which figuring in the top 50 of the world, we are yet to get to that size. That's where our honorable finance minister has said that India needs around 20 banks of State Bank size. So that may be the reason under merger, acquisition, or what you call later amalgamation, and later maybe some 2 are privatized so as to get the true value of the public. It is generally, of course, the recent period was very bad, but the banks have covered more than 72% or even 80% of the provision coverage. All the legacy accounts have been mostly solved. Radhakrishnan can say that correctly, maybe. And the IBC has really made a game changer in that respect. So, Muralidharan Sahab, that overall, I could say that the overall mindset of the people also has changed in by the way of new outlook and new type of people coming to the system. One difficulty we have arisen in the public sector bank primarily, that when we do the recruitment selection board, we get quite a lot of staff, particularly maybe in the officer as well as in the other category from the Bihar, Orissa, or I am not saying that they should not be there, but quite the regional geographically wise staff, that much we are not getting in the southern place or other place. And recently, that's why Honorable Finance Minister mentioned that quite a lot of places now it has become necessary that they should learn Tamil, Kannada, or some other languages. Other than that, then the customer will feel a difference. And one customer in Tamil Nadu, he made a complaint to the Finance Ministry that what I am saying they are not understanding, and what they are saying I am not understanding. So because this has not come only in the lower category, even in the managerial category, today this problem has come. So, and banks, particularly in the new generation banks, they have liberty in selecting the people and recruiting. Not that, and that whereas a public sector bank has to be by a competitive process, which is to be as I earlier by a transparent method. But earlier I mentioned that's why now Bank of Baroda and some of the banks have started with the contract recruitment, some of the higher posts, so as to fill up the specialization and all. Maybe that's internally some of them may not feel happy that. And one more, I am thinking that earlier was the move. The DGM and general manager and above, they should be transferred to or maybe put on placement in State Bank or bigger size these four banks, so that they get a higher exposure. And then there, when like earlier what Sangsale said, that change management, one of the GM and above were given 1 year training, and most of them are going to be ED and chairman of the bank. That type of leadership development and exposure management, competency mapping, and that has to be done by the bank. And at all level, we should have a transparent succession planning, and there should be very clear-cut policy and no discretionary things. With that, I am sure that every bank employee should feel I have got engaged with this vision and mission of the bank, and I have a career path, and I am dedicated to this institution. And our customers are our bread and butter, and they should be taken care. So I think that type of approach, banks will come up very well, and that will come through. And that has been a lot of intervention by the top management and the board, and board also evaluates all this and all. And the performance measurement also has become totally technology. Today, I can give the feedback to the.
I think we're going to wind up now.
Yes, sir. Wind up, sir. Same thing. So that's why with the transparent performance measurement as well as evaluation, and with the career path, the public sector bank employees, also all other bank employees, will rise up to the plan and see giving a helping hand in the 5 trillion economy for the India, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. I want to close this with a few points, mainly aimed at Mr. Radhakrishnan, is also there. See, our company works very closely with public sector bank and private sector banks. We train a large number of people. For example, I was part of the panel which selected probationary officers for Andhra Bank for 1 year for across pan-India. And I agree with Mr. Narendra. Most of the people who were joining Andhra Bank were from the Eastern India, and there were a lot of language issues. I was telling the bank, public sector banks have never made an effort to market themselves for the destination for high quality talent, which they had an imagery 20 years ago. That image is no longer there. Today, public sector banks are not the best place to go. IT industry is the best place to go. We need to attract very good talent to come into the banking industry. And the banks are not spending enough money to do the employer branding and positioning themselves as a good place to work. So this is one problem. South India is underrepresented. Western India is very underrepresented. So this is one problem. The second problem, banks need to have more freedom to hire the best people. We, for example, last year, we trained for some of the private sector banks somewhere around 40,000 employees on the latest technology skills. For example, how to use digital skills for selling, how to do digital sales for various customer relationship. The problem is, by the time we do this in public sector bank, it will take at least 1 year to do the tendering process, etc. They moved in one single week. We migrated. We trained on a single day 100 batches of people, of more than about 2,000 people on a single day. So this is the speed at which I think public sector banks must learn. Hopefully, they should be given autonomy to do that. I want to close this by making 2 requests. One request is we want to request the Honorable Prime Finance Minister and the Home Minister to give vaccination to capacity vaccination for every single bank employee, so that I think they do the human service to the public at large. They must be given a preference on par with everybody else, and everybody should be vaccinated. I know one of the private sector banks, 10% of the employees have got COVID. The 10%, that's the level of infliction on private sector bank. I'm sure public sector bank is the same. So vaccination is one request. And the second request I made to Mr. Alphonse, we must stop victimizing bank managers for decisions they made 15 years ago, 10 years ago. There must be a statute of limitations on the decisions they make. The moment these two are done, I think the bank manager will get back into his position. He'll get the respect that he deserves. With this, I'm going to hand over to Vatika Singh to close the Vatika. One of you should close this, and then I want to thank all our speakers, our audience. been very patient, and I greatly appreciate your presence here. Thank you very much. Over to you, Ashok.
Thank you, Muralinder Sab. You did a very well moderation also, and we are all very happy that relevant questions you have asked, and from the speakers or panelists also. And for your information, I think Home Ministry has ordered that all the bank employees should have to be given priority in vaccination as that of the medical staff. So that recently that order. So your point is 100% correct. They have to be given first at the transparent manner. And overall, sir, the whole points have come, and we are very happy that from the minister plus the top IAS officers and quite a lot of exposure, and including your exposure, it has really helped us also. And we would definitely interact with you and in terms of future course of actions.
Thank you. Over to you, Ashok.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir. And I'd like to take the opportunity to thank everyone on the panel today. Special thanks to Mr. KJ Alphonse, our chief guest for today, for joining with us and enlightening us on the topic. Other than that, I'd like to thank Mr. T. Muralidharan also for very well moderating the event today. TMI Network provides integrated talent acquisition and retention solutions. They are the only end-to-end HR services provider in India with expertise in recruitment, advertising, employer branding, and HR consulting. They pioneered recruitment advertising in India based on the insights that they gained through their interactions with thousands of candidates and hundreds of corporates. So, this is a small two-liner about the TMI group. And thank you so much, everyone, today for enlightening us on the topic.
Thank you.
Thank you, Radhakrishna, also.
Thank you. Thank you
Thank
so
you
much,
very much.
Radhakrishna.
All the best.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure
everybody.
meeting you all. Thank you.